Top Hezbollah commander has reportedly been killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Lebanese capital of Beirut.
This came just hours after the militant group launched more than 100 rockets at Israel in retaliation for this week's deadly explosions. Lebanese officials say Israel was behind the violent wave of explosions earlier this week, though Israel hasn't publicly claimed responsibility. Here to discuss the latest on this is Professor Peter Trumbore, chair of the Department of Political Science at Oakland University. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on.
So we have heard about a lot of clashes between Israel and Hezbollah in the last year. Things have really escalated as of late. Can you give our viewers a quick backgrounder of the history of the conflict between these two?
Sure. This actually dates back to roughly 1985. So Hezbollah is created in the wake of Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon. And Hezbollah is created as essentially an Iranian-sponsored militia protecting the Shiite population of southern Lebanon from the Israeli occupation and the Israeli military forces. It has since evolved to become both a political party and an important actor in the Lebanese political system and Lebanese government, but also to be an Iranian-sponsored proxy in the Middle East. And as part of that, it has been essentially waging a continuous struggle for the last 40 years with Israel. It's been more intense at some periods than in others. This period since last October has been the most intense period of conflict between Hezbollah and Israel since about 2006. But that's essentially it, right? These are two entities that have essentially been in a virtually continuous state of armed conflict for almost 40 years.
I feel like almost around every corner, whether it be political leaders or just the general public, you hear so many calls for ceasefires. In your opinion, with the insight that you have, do you think these attacks all but eliminate the odds of a chance for ceasefire? Are we headed to full-out war more than ever?
You know, so the U.S. government has been working very hard over the last 11 months to try to prevent an escalation and something that would lead to a much more dangerous sort of regional conflict. And it's been difficult, in all honesty, right? This has been very hard diplomacy. So far, the two sides, Israel and Hezbollah, have been content to exchange relatively limited strikes across their shared border, right? So southern Lebanon, northern Israel. But those have gotten more intense. And with the various explosions that happened this week across Lebanon, several dozen people killed, thousands of people injured. And then with this latest strike killing a senior Hezbollah official, Hezbollah has vowed retaliation. And so it's an increasingly dangerous and fraught situation. And there does not seem to be any significant desire on either side right now to lower the temperature. And so that's problematic. Hezbollah says that they will continue to fight as long as Hamas fights. So until the war in Gaza essentially cools off, Hezbollah says they will continue to strike against Israel in support of their ally.
Now, meanwhile, we're coming up on a year since those October 7th attacks. Still no ceasefire there for the war in Gaza. How might this conflict between Israel and Hezbollah affect the conflict between Israel and Hamas?
So it's all interconnected, right? It's all interconnected. And that's unfortunate because if the Israeli government, and there's been a lot of internal pressure on the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire. And so far, he has been the most resistant in sort of the Israeli government. And as long as he's not willing to really sort of move on this, I think that's going to continue to wage on. You know, Hamas doesn't have a lot of incentive either at this point, you know. And so this is one of those things that the two sides are going to continue, I think, to fight, not necessarily for good reasons, not necessarily for productive reasons. You know, I was talking to my students yesterday about, you know, historically speaking, what are some of the reasons that wars happen? Well, sometimes wars happen over things like honor and reputation. That wars continue because one side refuses to be seen as weak in the eyes of another. And that kind of thinking gets in the way of any kind of meaningful steps to resolve some of these things.
You see that between individuals and nations,
Absolutely
unfortunately.
Right. Yes.
All right. Well, Peter Trumbore, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your expertise.
Happy to be here.